Hello and welcome to another Warhammer 40,000 battle report brought to you by the Legion Wargaming. This Imperial world is located in a subsector on the verge of being overrun by the Tyranid Hive fleet known as Kraken. The Lord Governor of this subsector has issued a call to any and all Imperial forces to make haste to protect the planets under his control. But in his wildest dreams he could not hope for that call to be answered by the fabled Grey Knights chapter, and yet they have come. Their strike cruiser was returning to Titan, having intervened and dealt with the Eldar Seers that were directing a war against the Imperium in a nearby subsector, and they have responded. They are making haste to this planet. Can their psychic might overcome the will of the Hive Mind? The battle today is 2,250 points, and it is the Scouring Dawn of War deployment. The Grey Knights will be deploying on the far side of the battlefield, and the Tyranids will be swarming on this side. The Grey Knights have decided to strike at the Tyranids in this complex of bunkers. Should be good for the Tyranids, plenty and plenty of cover. The objectives have already been placed. There are 6 of them across the table. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. And of course in this mission we do not know how many victory points each one is worth yet. This should be a good one. Let's take a look at the armies. This 2,250 point Tyranid list is a single combined arms detachment and is led by a Hive Tyrant with wings, the Miasma Cannon, Shredder Shard, Beetles and Old Adversary. And we have another HQ, a Tervigon. He has the Norn Crown and Adrenal Glands and Shredder Shard Beetles. Troops, there is a brood of 30 Gaunts, allowing another Tervigon to be taken as a troop's choice, and he has Adrenal Glands and Shredder Shard Beetles as well. For elites, this detachment has a Haruspex and a single Zoanthrope, and crucially for the Scouring has 3 fast attack choices: a Hive Crone and 2 broods, each of 6 Raveners, and they have Rending Claws and Death Spitters. And finally, some more monsters in this detachment. All 3 heavy support slots are filled: a Trigon Prime and 2 Morlocks. This is another Tyranid army that is packed full of monstrous creatures. Will the Grey Knights be able to handle them? Let's take a look at the Nemesis Strike Force. This 2,250 point Nemesis Strike Force detachment is led by Brother Librarian, Mastery level 3, and he has his Terminator armour and his Force Stave, and he has brought along 4 troops choices: a squad of Terminators with halberds and a silencer, and another squad of Terminators with swords and an incinerator, and 2 strike squads, each just with 5 members. They have a mix of Force halberds and Force swords, and they each have an incinerator. This being a Nemesis Strike Force detachment, there are only 2 available fast attack slots which could play in the Grey Knights' favour, but they have nevertheless filled both of them with a squad of 10 Interceptors, a mix of Force weapons including 2 Demon Hammers, and they also have an incinerator, and a Storm Raven gunship, twin-linked assault cannon and twin-linked heavy bolters, which will be transporting the first of the 4 Elite's choices, a squad of 8 purifiers. They all have force swords and they have brought along 2 incinerators. It's clear that the Grey Knights are intending to burn out the bugs. The second elite choice is a squad of 5 paladins. 3 of them have falchions, and there is 1 psi cannon in that squad as well. And the remaining 2 elite slots are both filled with dreadnoughts for some long range firepower. 1 with a twin link las cannon and a power fist, and the other with a twin link las cannon and a missile launcher. And just the 1 heavy support choice in this detachment, it's the Nemesis Dread Knight. He has a great sword, Gatling silencer and a personal teleporter. Could this be the ideal force to deal with all of the Tyranid monstrous creatures? If they can get force off a few times, there could be a lot of instant killing. Let's see, moving into deployment. And the armies have deployed, although, as we have come to expect from the Grey Knights Nemesis Strike Force, not too many Grey Knights are on the table at the moment. They have deployed both of their dreadnoughts overlooking this objective and with good cover in these ruins behind these barricades, and they have deployed the interceptors in a full squad of 10 and the Nemesis Dread Knight looking to use their personal teleporters to shunt forward into excellent positions, and in the case of the interceptors to steer clear of any Morlocks popping up and eating them. The Tyranids have a much more formidable line. Over on their far right, the Hive Crone and the Hive Tyrant have obviously been disturbed from their roosts in this ruined complex, and they are about to take to the air. And in the Tyranid centre, they have their 2 troops choices. The huge brood of Gaunts has already seized 1 objective, and they have their Turvigon with them, looking to spawn more. If the Tyranids can bog the Grey Knights down with cheap Gaunts, that will be a potentially successful strategy. And over on the Tyranid left, the HQ Turvigon is directing both broods of 6 Raveners. He has the Norn Crown, giving him an extended synapse range, but the Zoanthrope is also over here on the far left for support, and the Haruspex, as usual, is just looking to barge up the centre of the table and eat everything he can. The Hive Mind has come across these silver humans before, and it knows that they pop up from nowhere. In response, the Hive Mind has decided to leave the Trigon Prime and both Morlocks in reserve so that they can appear where required. The Tyranids deployed first, so unless the Grey Knights can seize the initiative, we will be going into Tyranids Turn 1. End of Tyranids' first movement phase, and following the failure of the Grey Knights to seize the initiative, the Tyranid line has surged forwards. On the left, the Raveners are ideally suited for this kind of terrain, and they have slithered forward. They are rapidly closing the gap. They are followed up by the Zoanthrope, the Haruspex and the Turvigon wearing the Norn Crown. He has spawned a brood of 10 Gaunts, and he has not yet run out. He will be spawning some more. The central Turvigon has also pushed up with his big brood of 30, and he too has spawned a new brood of 11, and he hasn't run out either. Bad news for the Grey Knights. They could be swamped with Gaunts if these Turvigons carry on like this. And the 2 Tyranid flying monsters have taken to the air. They're not quite sure how they're best going to be employed yet, so they move to the centre of the table to see what they can see. Because of where the Grey Knights have deployed, and with the Tyranids moving forward, we are now aware of the points values of all the objectives. We have 2 right in the centre of the Tyranid line, and on their left 1. The Grey Knights Dreadnoughts are overlooking an objective worth 3, and the Dread Knight is standing over an objective worth 2. Right in the centre of the table we have the maximum points objective. This one is worth 4, and although it hasn't been discovered yet, by process of elimination we know that this one is worth 3. The Tyranids are being aggressive. They usually are, and they may enjoy one brief moment of psychic superiority before the majority of the Grey Knights turn up. Going into Tyranids Turn 1 Psychic Phase. End of Tyranid Psychic Phase Turn 1, and even with so few Grey Knights on the table, they still had 6 denying dice to the Tyranids' 8 warp charges. They allowed this Tervigon to cast Catalyst on both himself and the Haruspecs. I think they want to concentrate their fire on the Raveners. But when the Hive Tyrant attempted to cast the Horror on the Interceptors, even though he was successful with 4 warp charges, the awesome power of the Grey Knights' Aegis denied it. The Grey Knights are setting out their stall for psychic superiority. Let's see if the Tyranid line continues to surge forward in their first shooting phase. End of Tyranid Turn 1 shooting phase, and a series of very poor run rolls on the Tyranid left have meant that they have not got much further towards the Grey Knights, but the Hive Tyrant has flapped forward onto the roof of this bunker, and this Tervigon and his Gaunts have surged forward. They are now swarming all over the central objective, and they have been followed up by the newly spawned brood, which is going to sit on this objective. The only firing from the Tyranids came from the Hive Crone, and he was very, very accurate. He got 2 tentacled hits on this Dreadnought and has managed to strip off 2 hull points and destroy its missile launcher. So, not bad, but this Tyranid army does not contain an awful lot of firepower. With no assaults, we move into Grey Knights Turn 1. Say hello to the Nemesis Strike Force. End of Grey Knights Turn 1 movement phase, and from reserve has appeared the Brother Librarian and the Paladins. They have deep struck right into the face of the Tyranid assault, and a strike squad has appeared in support of their venerable brothers piloting the dreadnoughts. Another strike squad attempted to deep strike right next to the Raveners, but scattered onto them and had to go back into ongoing reserves. And neither of the 2 Terminator squads have arrived. But the Grey Knights are being quite cunning. They are clearly attempting to target the Tyranid fast attack choices in accordance with their mission. We could see some concentrated firepower over on this flank. Meanwhile, the Dread Knight has not moved. He is preparing to unleash his Gatling silencer at the flying Hive Crone, and the Interceptors have engaged their personal teleporters. They have shunted forwards right into this corner of the battlefield. In a clever move, they have both secured a 3-point objective and protected one of their 2 fast attack choices. The Tyranids are going to have to seriously divert their attack to deal with them. So disappointing reserve rolls and deep striking from the Grey Knights, but they are being very, very cunning, and we are about to move into the phase that they like the best. It's the Psychic phase. Grey Knights Turn 1. End of Grey Knight Psychic phase Turn 1, and the Brother Librarian put a lot of power into his attempt to cast Cleansing Flame, and he managed a success with 5 successful warp charges, but the Hive Tyrant was in the Nova radius and the Tyranids had to put all 12 of their dice, but fortunately for them it was denied. That did leave the Tyranids with no chance of stopping the Dread Knights and the Paladins and the Strike Squad all getting force on their force weapons, meaning the Tyranids will have to be very careful if they intend to assault them. So, disappointing that the Grey Knights did not cleanse the Tyranids with their cleansing flame, but getting force off is very, very dangerous against a Tyranid army. Going into Grey Knights shooting phase, turn 1. End of Grey Knights turn 1 shooting phase, and it's been a good one. Both the Paladins and the Strike Squad ran, which they can do after deep striking, because they're part of a Nemesis strike force, and they combine their fire on the Raveners. They managed to shoot down 3 of them in a hail of bolts, incinerator fire and psi cannon ammunition. The 2 dreadnoughts also targeted this brood of Raveners, but despite both of them hitting with their twin-linked las cannons, they both rolled 1s to wound, so no effect from them. But channeling all of his force through his Gatling silencer, the Dread Knight targeted the swooping Hive Crone, and even though it jinked, a single wound got through. Under the effect of force, that instant killed him. That is first blood, and it is also another point for destroying a fast attack choice, so excellent work there from the Dread Knight. And finally, the Interceptors have run to fully occupy this building. They are still holding this objective as well, and they are going to protect themselves as they are a fast attack choice. So, although the deep striking and the reserve rolls are disappointing, the Grey Knights have had quite a good first turn. Let's see how the Tyranids respond with their own reserve rolls going into Tyranids turn 2. End of Tyranid turn 2 movement phase, and the swarm is looking to overwhelm the Brother Librarian and his Paladins. The Hive Mind has recognised that he is a powerful Psyker and they want him consumed. Both Morlocks and the Trigon Prime arrived by deep strike. One Morlock managed to tunnel up neatly in the gap between the Paladins and the Strike Squad, and the other Morlock also scattered, and he only consumed 1 member of the Strike Squad. The Raveners on the Tyranid far left are pushing up. They are wary that the Grey Knights have force on their weapons, but they really do want to tear them to pieces. And in the centre, both Tervigons and the Haruspecs are also moving forward. This Tervigon has spawned another brood of 10 Gaunts, but he has now run out, and the other Tervigon rolled double 1 and a 2. So he has run out as well, which must be a huge relief to the Grey Knights. The brood of 30 is moving up. They are going to pelt the Paladins with their flesh borers. The Raveners are going to target them with Death Spitters, the Hive Tyrant with the Miasma Cannon, Shredder Shard Beetles and the Trigon Prime. They really do want to wipe this squad out. But the Tyranids really do have no answer for the Nemesis Dread Knight on this flank, or the Interceptors that have taken up such an excellent position in this building at the rear of their lines. All they have back in their deployment zone are the newly spawned broods of Gaunts that are sitting on a couple of objectives. Still, things are looking quite grim for this side of the Grey Knights line. Let's see if they can resist the psychic onslaught first in Tyranid turn 2 psychic phase. End of Tyranids turn 2 psychic phase, and the winds of the warp blew very weakly. The Grey Knights allowed this Tervigon to put onslaught onto the massive brood of Gaunts. They are going to run up and fire now, because the Grey Knights wanted to save their denying power for Psychic Scream. And the Hive Tyrant duly attempted it, but the Brother Librarian managed to deny it. So, not much happening in the Tyranid psychic phase, the Grey Knights are so good at shutting down psychic armies. But they're up against it now, going into Tyranid Turn 2 shooting phase. End of Tyranid shooting phase Turn 2, and things looked grim for the Paladins when the Hive Tyrant took down one with a blast from the miasma cannon, and then managed to slay another with a swarm of Shredder Shard beetles. And another Paladin was wounded by the massive volley of flesh borer beetles fired by the huge brood of gaunts that ran up. But their armour proved effective against the rest of the Tyranid shooting. The electric pulse from the Trigon Prime and the Death Spitters from the Raveners caused no damage at all. So the Paladins, they have lost a couple of their brothers, but they are still there in force. The three remaining Raveners here opened up on the strike squad with their Death Spitters and managed to slay two, including the Justicar. Surely 3 Raveners can overcome 2 Grey Knights. But at the end of the Tyranid shooting phase, we are left with a quandary. These Paladins, they have force on them. Are the Tyranids willing to risk the assault? We'll see, but these Raveners definitely are. Going into Tyranid assault phase Turn 2. End of Tyranid assault phase Turn 2, and although the brother with the incinerator managed to wound one of the Raveners as they came slithering in, they both missed with their force weapons, so the Raveners tore the 2 remaining Grey Knights to pieces, and they have consolidated. And in the centre, the Hive Mind decided that it was better to tie up the Paladins with the Raveners than to leave them free to charge any of the Tyranid monstrous creatures, which they could easily kill when they have hammer hand and force. The Paladins still managed to chop down 2 of the Raveners as they slithered in, and in return the Raveners managed to pull down another Paladin and wound the brother Librarian. But crucially, with the Hive Tyrant and the Tervigons, the Raveners are fearless. So the Paladins are locked in combat. The Tyranids look to have the upper hand at the moment. The Grey Knights desperately need some reinforcements. Let's see if they have any more deep striking in their second turn. End of Grey Knights movement phase Turn 2, and the bad news keeps on coming for them. The Purifiers in the Storm Raven have failed to arrive, and both squads of Terminators have once again failed to arrive. This is the risk with the Nemesis Strike Force, but at least the Strike Squad that went back into ongoing reserves has appeared, and they are looking to attack the Tyranids from the rear. They do not think that they can triumph in the heart of the swarm. The Nemesis Dread Knight has turned. He is going to attempt to shoot down the flying Hive Tyrant as he did the Hive Crone in the previous turn. That would certainly help the Grey Knights out immensely. And in the centre, the Paladins are locked. They are preparing to sell their lives dearly, and the Dreadnoughts, with their centuries of experience, realise that they are about to be overrun and destroyed. So they are going to continue with the plan, while the Paladins attempt to take out this brood of Raveners that they are struggling with. The Dreadnoughts have turned their attention to the other brood of Raveners. If they're going to be overrun, they may as well try to eliminate the fast attack targets in accordance with the mission objectives. But still, with a very poor set of reserve rolls, things are looking quite bleak for the Grey Knights. Let's see how they get on in their second psychic phase. End of Grey Knights psychic phase Turn 2, and although they are beset by foes and under a lot of pressure, their psychic power has once again overwhelmed the Hive Mind. The Tyranids have failed to deny any of the powers manifested by the Grey Knights, including Hammer Hand and Force, on the Paladins, Force on the Nemesis Dread Knight, and Hammer Hand on the newly arrived Strike Squad. So the Grey Knights are not out of it yet. Let's see if the Nemesis Dread Knight can repeat his excellent anti-air fire from turn 1. Going into Grey Knight's turn 2 shooting phase. End of Grey Knight's shooting phase turn 2, and both Dreadnoughts open fire on the brood of Raveners in the open with their twin-link las cannon, managing to instant kill one more of them. The Paladins remain locked in combat, but the Nemesis Dread Knight has come through again. He managed a whopping 6 hits with his Gatling silencer on the flying Hive Tyrant, and with Force on once again, he has blown another Tyranid flying monstrous creature out of the air. Have we stumbled across the perfect antidote to the flying monsters? And the newly arrived Strike Squad, following its run, targeted the brood of gaunts that were holding this objective with supporting fire from the interceptors, and has wiped that brood out. So a very, very good phase, given how few units the Grey Knights have to shoot with. We have an assault ongoing. Let's see if the Paladins and the Brother Librarian can survive another turn. Grey Knight's assault phase turn 2. End of Grey Knight's assault phase turn 2, and the Raveners were defeated by the mighty tactical dreadnought armour of the Paladins. They only managed to cause one more wound. Meanwhile, the Paladins hacked apart another Ravener, and the Brother Librarian smashed one with his Force stave. They have won the combat, but the Raveners remain fearless, and the Dreadnought, lurking behind the Morlock and the Trigon Prime, attempted to charge these Raveners but failed to cover the distance. The Paladins are standing strong, but it looks like they're going to have to. Going into Tyranids Turn 3. End of Tyranids Turn 3 movement phase, and the death of the Hive Tyrant has got the swarm a little bit confused. They are unsure as to what to do this turn. They have decided to continue overrunning the Brother Librarian and his Paladins. They have got the Zoanthrope hovering forward on the left to see if he can take out this Dreadnought with a Warp Blast, and the Trigon Prime is going to try and finish off the badly damaged Dreadnought. In the Grey Knight's centre, the Haruspex is also moving up in support, but the Tervigons have decided to hold the central objective. The Tyranids are currently controlling quite a few objectives. They've got this little brood of gaunts on this one and the centre one, and they will be overrunning this one at some point. But the problem the Tyranids have is they do not know how to deal with the Grey Knights that are over on this flank of the battlefield. They've sent the Morlocks burrowing. The Hive Mind feels that is its best chance of taking down the Nemesis Dread Knight, which seems to be shredding every monstrous creature that walks into its gun sights, causing a lot of concern for the Trigon and the Tervigons. And right down in this corner we have 10 interceptors and the newly arrived Strike Squad. They're a long way away, and the Tervigons do not feel that they can go up against all those Force Halberds. It's difficult, especially given that the Grey Knights still have the Purifiers and the Storm Raven and 2 squads of Terminators in reserve. Could it be that the Brother Librarian and the Paladins have given their lives to allow the rest of the Strike Force to pick the Tyranid swarm to pieces? It's starting to look that way. The Tyranid advantage is starting to look a little bit shaky. Still, let's see what the Tyranids can do without their Hive Tyrant in their 3rd Psychic phase. End of Tyranid Psychic phase turn 3, and unfortunately for the swarm, with the Brother Librarian still standing in the centre of this part of the line with his Psychic Hood, he is easily denying all of the Tyranids' attempts to bolster their units with psychic powers and to attack with warp blasts. The Zone Throat was easily denied when he tried to target the Dreadnought. So the Tyranids are going to have to finish this with their claws. Going into Tyranid shooting phase, turn 3, but not a lot of shooting. End of Tyranid turn 3 shooting phase, and when we said not a lot of shooting, we really meant no shooting at all. The only thing that's happened is the Zone Throat has hovered back behind these barricades in case that Dreadnought decides he wants to get some revenge with his Power Fist. So this is the important phase of this turn. Tyranid assault phase, turn 3. End of Tyranid turn 3 assault phase. Unfortunately for the Tyranids, as the Haruspex went barging his way in, he managed to crush one of the wounded paladins with his Hammer of Wrath, reducing the attacks back. But the last paladin and the Brother Librarian managed to take down 2 more Raveners, wiping out 1 brood and earning the Grey Knights a point. But sadly for the Grey Knights, the weight of attacks from the massive brood of Gaunts and the Haruspex and the 2 remaining Raveners pulled down the last paladin and the Brother Librarian, earning the Tyranids slay the Warlord and removing a very, very nasty threat. The Trigon Prime, meanwhile, scratched its claws against the armour of the Dreadnought but failed to take its last hull point. It did no damage. In return, the Dreadnought could not wound the Trigon either, so they remain locked. The Tyranids are relieved that that very, very dangerous character and squad are dead, but the Grey Knights still have lots of reserves to deploy, and the Dread Knight is preparing to summon force into his Gatling Silencer again. Let's see what the Grey Knights do going into their third turn. End of Grey Knights movement phase, turn 3, and in a move that has surprised us all, the Nemesis Dread Knight has engaged his personal teleporter and he has teleported right into the thick of it. Fortunately for the Grey Knights, both the Storm Raven containing the Purifiers has come zooming on, and 1 squad of the late Terminators has also arrived, and they have a silencer, and the Tyranid monstrous creatures are beginning to be very, very afraid of those particular guns. This strike squad has moved up to support the newly arrived Terminators, and the Interceptors have once again held position. They are going to protect themselves and continue to hold a 3-point objective. They are doing a very valuable job despite doing very little. 1 Dreadnought remains locked in combat with the Trigon, and the other Dreadnought, he is either going to add his las cannon fire to finish off the Raveners, or if the Storm Raven can take them down, he is going to try and save his brother Dreadnought from the Trigon Prime. He has a Power Fist, he may be able to take the Trigon out. And the Nemesis Dread Knight is preparing to unload his Gatling Silencer once again. The Grey Knights still have a lot of potential. In fact, it looks like the tide may be turning. Let's see, going into Grey Knight's Psychic Phase, turn 3. End of Grey Knight Psychic Phase, turn 3, and the Tyranids managed to deny the Grey Knight Terminator's attempt to cast force on their halberds, but they could not stop either the Strike Squad casting force on their halberds, or, crucially, the Dread Knight. He once again is channeling force through his Gatling Silencer. Good news for the Tyranids is that this Terminator squad also had a silencer, so that will not be affected by force this turn. Still, let's see what the Grey Knights can do in their third shooting phase. End of Grey Knight's shooting phase, turn 3, and the Nemesis Dread Knight has done it again. With a punishing volley from his Gatling Silencer, he took out a Tervigon, meaning that in 3 volleys of fire he has taken out a Hive Crone, a Flying Hive Tyrant and a Turvigon. The Gatling Silencer under the effect of force is deadly against Tyranid monstrous creatures. Both the Storm Raven and the Dreadnought targeted the last brood of Raveners with their weapons, but one remains on 1 wound, so it looks like the Dreadnought is going to have to finish it off with his Power Fist in assault. The other Dreadnought remains locked with the Trygon Prime, and as the Terminators had their attempt to summon force denied, they have run back and allowed their brothers from the Strike Squad who have force on their halberds to take the lead in case this Turvigon starts moving in their direction. And the Interceptors remain happy, preserving themselves and holding a 3-point objective. It is beginning to look like the Grey Knights have played an absolute blinder. They have really turned this game around. Let's see if they can continue that in their assault phase, turn 3. End of Grey Knights assault phase, turn 3, and the Dreadnought with the Power Fist managed to wade in and crush the life from the last Ravener. So the Grey Knights have got the maximum 3 points for destroying all of the Tyranids' fast attack choices, but sadly his brother Dreadnought was finally taken down by a swipe from the Trygon Prime's claws. Still, things are looking a lot better for the Grey Knights. Let's see how the Tyranids respond in their 4th turn. End of Tyranid movement phase, turn 4, and with the Nemesis Dreadknight now standing on top of a building, the Morlocks had to search for another target. They both attempted to tunnel up underneath the Terminators. One scattered onto the Strike Squad, and even though he managed to devour 3 of them, he still could not be deployed, and unfortunately he was destroyed as he attempted to emerge. And the other Morlock scattered 12 inches off the table. He's gone back into ongoing reserves. With the Grey Knights now showing a very strong presence in this sector of the battlefield, the Turvigon in the centre has ordered the Gaunts to sweep back around and see if they can drag down the Grey Knights with a huge volley from their flesh borers. Meanwhile, the other little brood of Gaunts is making full use of the cover of this bunker as it still clings on to this objective. The Haruspecs and the Zoanthrope have decided that this Dreadnought needs to be dealt with, and they are crunching their way through these barricades to get to him, and we have an epic confrontation. The Trygon Prime cannot tolerate the Dreadknight anymore. The Hive Mind has seen too many of its key creatures be gunned down. So the Trygon and the Dreadknight atop this building. Who will win? Who's to say? The Dreadknight still has force on it, which must worry the Trygon. But let's see. Going into Tyranid turn 4 psychic phase. End of Tyranid turn 4 psychic phase, and with a relatively low roll for warp charges, the Zoanthrope used them all to direct a warp blast against the Dreadknight, attempt to help out the Trygon Prime, but the Dreadknight easily denied it. The Tyranids really have not been able to do much at all in terms of psychic powers. This battle, the Grey Knights have been fully in control of the phase. Let's see if the Tyranids can have more effect in their 4th shooting phase. End of Tyranid shooting phase, turn 4, and it looks like the dice have turned against them. All of the Gaunts that were in range, plus the Turvigon with his Stinger Salvo, targeted the last 2 members of the Strike Squad, but had no effect. The Grasping Tongue of the Haruspecs had no effect, unsurprisingly, on the armoured hull of the Dreadnought, and the Bioelectric Pulse summoned up by the Trygon Prime did not do any damage to the Dreadknight. So An entire phase passes for the Tyranids without a single wound caused on the Grey Knights. Let's see if they can bring it back in their turn 4 assault phase. End of Tyranids Turn 4 assault phase, and the Haruspex smashed into the Grey Knight's Dreadnought, and with one sweep of his mighty claws he managed to explode the venerable war machine. So a good result for the Tyranids there, but the Dreadnought stands triumphant on top of this bunker as the Trigon Prime slammed into him, inflicting 6 hits. They thought, could this be curtains for the Dreadnought? But none of the 6 hits managed to do a wound. And with 2 mighty swings of his greatsword, he chopped down the Trigon. Still under the effects of force, the Trigon never stood a chance against the return attacks. His only hope was mutual destruction. So, not a very good turn at all for the Tyranids, and it's getting worse because we are going into Grey Knights turn 4 and the automatic arrival of their final Terminator squad. End of Grey Knights movement phase turn 4, and the final squad of Terminators with their incinerator has arrived, and they are clearly targeting this objective held by the small brood of Gaunts. They can run and they have an incinerator, so they may well be able to seize that in a storm of flame. The Storm Raven has dropped down into hover mode and deployed the purifiers. They have 2 incinerators and they need to start burning their way through the mass of Gaunts that are still holding the 4-point objective in the centre, and behind them the Dreadnought is continuing his campaign against the Tyranid monstrous creatures. If he can get force off again, he could well shoot or slice his way through the Haruspex. The other squad of Terminators with their halberds have moved in front of their Strike Force brothers. They have decided they are going to summon up force and they are going to take on this Tervigon, the one wearing the Norn crown, which is just about the only thing keeping all these Gaunts in the battle. And the Strike Squad themselves have moved back to make sure they are controlling this objective. And as they have been for nearly the whole battle, the Interceptors are still happy where they are. They can just about pick off a few Gaunts at long range, but crucially they need to protect this objective and themselves. The Grey Knights are beginning to see this as a bit of a mopping up operation. Let's see how they get on, or rather just how many times they can summon Force and Hammerhand in their 4th Psychic phase. End of Grey Knight Psychic phase turn 4, and the Tyranids used all of their dice to deny Force being cast on this squad of Terminators, and you can understand why. They're looking like they're about to charge the Tervigon, but that meant they had no dice left and they could not stop the Dreadnought manifesting Force yet again, and perhaps even more crucially, the Purifiers summoning up a cleansing flame which wiped out the brood of Gaunts in the central bunker, killed 5 from this brood, wounded this Tervigon, and perhaps most crucially of all, fried the Zoanthrope that was standing next to the Haruspex, meaning that the only Synapse creature that the Tyranids have left is the Tervigon, standing in the centre of the battlefield. He still has the Norn crown, but it looks like the Grey Knights may be taking this battle into the endgame. Going into Grey Knights shooting phase turn 4. End of Grey Knight shooting phase turn 4, and the newly arrived Terminators ran an inch and then took out 5 of these Gaunts with their Storm Bolters and Incinerator. Still could have been a lot worse for the Gaunts, and it was a lot worse for the Haruspex. Yet again, the Gatling Silencer has taken down a Tyranid monstrous creature in one volley. the Dread Knight has dominated this battle, and that weapon is absolutely fantastic against the Tyranids. The Purifiers and their Storm Raven were very ineffective in their shooting, but they still managed to take down 3 or 4 gaunts from the rear of this big brood, and another 3 or 4 from the front were shot down by long range fire from the interceptors. The Tervigon was wounded twice more by fire from the Strike Squad and the Terminators. Even though they don't have force currently active, these Terminators are going to charge the Tervigon in Grey Knight's assault phase turn 4. End of Grey Knight's assault phase turn 4, and the Terminators laid into the Tervigon with their force halberds, and they have hacked it to pieces. The resulting backlash has reduced this gaunt squad to 2 and this gaunt squad to 7, bringing the total Tyranid forces on the table to 9 gaunts. Although on the plus side they have both miraculously passed their morale checks. So the Grey Knights are dominant, the Grey Knights are triumphant, but for pure comedy value, let's go into Tyranid turn 5. End of Tyranid turn 5, and both broods of gaunts failed their instinctive behaviour test and decided that the best option for them was to leg it. Going into Grey Knights turn 5. End of Grey Knights turn 5, and this squad of Terminators moved to secure this objective and gun down the last 2 gaunts. And the central squad of Terminators moved to secure the central objective, combine their fire with the Purifiers and the remaining members of the Strike Squad, and gun down all of these gaunts. There are no Tyranids left on the table, and the Grey Knights are in possession of all 6 objectives as well as these 3. The Dread Knight has moved to secure that one. The hovering Storm Raven moved flat out to secure that one, and as they have been for the whole game, well, since they teleported there in turn 1, the Interceptors are holding this objective. So a dominant performance from the Grey Knights. They really turned it around. Let's take a look at the victory point totals. So at the end of this epic game, where the Grey Knights really have proven how good they are, the final scores are 15 points to the Grey Knights for holding all of the objectives, plus Slay the Warlord, Linebreaker and First Blood for another 3, and another 3 points for wiping out 2 broods of Raveners and the Hive Crone. All of the Tyranids' fast attack choices brings the Grey Knight total to 21. The Tyranids, well, they managed to slay the Brother Librarian, so they get a point. Final score, 21 points to the Grey Knights and 1 point to the Tyranids. This really has been a game that swung. At the start of turn 2, it looked like the failure of the Grey Knights' reserves to arrive was going to doom them to defeat. The Tyranid swarm looked like it was going to overrun them, but we were disregarding just how much damage Grey Knights can do, and they swung the battle back against the Tyranids and have ended up dominating. It has been a great game, it's been a surprising game, and we cannot wait to do it again soon. Thanks very much for watching. Please subscribe to our channel, and we will keep producing as many Warhammer 40,000 battle reports as we can. See ya!